it hurts. And I'm too sexy for Milan, too sexy for Milan, New York and Japan.
Hey everybody, welcome back this week to Doing It with Styles. I got a really super special, fun guest today, and for a lot of my Halloween fans, I think part of this might be kind of interesting. No, it's not Elvira, but it's close. Today I have Melinda Mitchel, who is the curator and director of the Museum of Mortality. And also, she is the founder and owner of Madame Cora's Emporium. And we're going to talk about that, and Melinda's going to tell us what she's doing there and what the hell this all means. So I have to ask, first I want to read this. I took this off of your website. I had seen this a long, long time ago, and it jumped out at me again. And I think it came from a book or something that I might have been parentheses in eternity. And it says, on your gravestone, you have two dates, separated by a dash. It is neither date that is important, but rather the dash in between. And I've always thought that that was so awesome because we tend to focus on the first date or the last date. So that is just a very, very tiny, tiny part of the information that's on your website. Welcome to the Museum of Mortality. So can you tell us a little bit about that, Melinda? How the heck did that get started?
Well, my mother has been an antique collector since well before I was born. And so growing up, I grew up appreciating antiques, learning about antiques. A lot of people show me the weirdest things, and it's like I just happen to know what it is. And over the last couple of years, probably about the last 10, 15 years, she started getting more into the Victorian era. And she was working at a museum, and they asked her, about coming in and helping with a graveyard, cemetery walk. And so she started researching Victorian mourning traditions so she could discuss, some of the basic things like, why do we wear black?
Right.
And so she did the cemetery walk, and then she finally looked at me and she goes, well, I've been collecting all these things that I like, but I want to leave you stuff that you're not just going to be like, get rid of it. It's not my thing. She goes, so what are you interested in? And so I started talking to her. I'm like, well, I really love, like the Victorian mourning. I really love medical history. So the weird, creepy medical tools like trepanation saws for, removing sections of the skull to, antique anesthesia equipment, you name it. I said, I've always been kind of in the funeral, frame of mind. When I was 18 years old living in Las Vegas, I almost got a job working as a removal tech for one of the mortuaries out there. So I probably would have been a funeral director by now.
Wow.
So she started collecting stuff that I liked that she also found a new interest in. And then she ended up doing another museum cemetery tour. And so she came to me and she was like, I need a Victorian mourning outfit. And because she had done pretty much with historical costuming 1100s to like 1600s, and I picked up in the Victorian era after her. She did some up into the early Victorian, what we call Civil War era. So, but I had the experience with making the bustles and stuff, so she came to me with that. So I had my business, the Filigree Toad, which did Victorian and steampunk wear. And that's actually, how we met. And so she started getting more into it, started collecting a lot more. I was helping find, unique and interesting pieces. And then I thought about actually going back to school again to be a funeral director. So I reached out to the one school that was close enough to me and found out that I had done so many classes in Vegas that I almost had, basically like a bachelor's degree, but not enough in the right categories.
Right.
So they were like, well, if you want to be a funeral director, you'll have to go, basically almost start all over, which is 4 years of school, then 2 years of mortuary school, a year of apprenticeship. And I'm like, I'm almost 40. No. And at that point in time, I had a 1-year-old son. So I was like, there's no way I can do full-time work. And so one day, one of my friends just was like, your mom just needs to adopt me. So when she dies, I get half the collection. I said, over my dead body. And she goes, well, this stuff deserves to be in a museum. Ding. Within a month, this
Holy moly.
was done.
Wow.
So this is all the base background information and research putting the museum together, because I've done a lot in my life, from all sorts of events and being a vendor coordinator, event owner and runner. I was the vendor coordinator for Pyrofest Las Vegas for a number of years. I had to step back the last couple years because of my son. And because I live in Wisconsin, so I'd have to travel out there, be there for, a week and a half, and then travel back home again.
Right.
And it got to be too hard, on me to be able to keep all the balls running. But between the 10, 15 different businesses I've had over the years, with all the knowledge and the experience that I've got, I just was missing like one key piece to back me up. So I'm currently in my last class for museum studies through Northwestern University. So I'll have my certificate.
This is an actual brick and mortar museum?
It will be, yes.
Okay, so it's not just an online thing that posts some pictures. You're actually going to have a museum that I could walk through and see things, and cool.
Yep. So basically, through the museum planning, right now I'm going after my 501c3 not-for-profit status, which is what's needed to become an actual organization and entity. So I'm working on the paperwork right now. So I had to do some of the fact finding and, the information, because the IRS wants you to estimate how much money you're going to be making each year. And I'm like,
I love that part of it,
I don't know if I'm going to be in 10,000 square feet, 20,000 square feet, 100,000 square feet. So I broke it down for each of those. Well, if we only can do this much square footage, this is how many people we can get through the doors. Right. This is how much money I make. So realistically, with the amount of information that the museum is going to be covering, with the amount of artifacts and items that we're going to have, I'm hoping for starting at 40,000 square feet, but I have the feeling I'm going to end up needing closer to 220,000 square feet.
Yeah. Well, if you can find space that is expandable at some point in time, in the future, that's ideal. But
so I'm looking towards Milwaukee, because I do live in Wisconsin, and I'll need year-round tourism, and I'll need a space big enough. And Milwaukee is a lot better than Burlington, my little tiny town that I live in right now. So I'm looking towards Milwaukee. Yes, it's going to be about 3 to 5 years before we actually open the doors, but I'm also taking a different approach with the museum than most. I'm looking at actually starting the build from the ground up, instead of just going into a preoccupied building or anything like that and expanding. I'm looking at starting literally from the ground up. A lot of museums that we have predate ADA compliancy.
Right.
And that's been part of a problem. They're not accessible for everyone. Not every area is accessible, even though they've done the bare minimum to try and, comply with ADA. If we start brand new and we start from the ground up, I can actually go above and beyond with the ADA compliancy. So that way it's not just the bare bones basics, where we can actually be fully compliant and then some.
That's
because
awesome.
I'm extra.
But that is so often. And I mean, I'm not trying to get personal, but why Wisconsin? Why not someplace like New York or Las Vegas or LA or one of the big cities? I would think that something like that in Vegas would just be a knockout. I mean, they had the whole dead body exhibit here, and that was a huge smash. So anyway, I'm just asking.
I grew up in Las Vegas. I don't do well in the desert heat. I actually kind of like having 4 seasons. I mean, sometimes in Wisconsin they happen all in one day.
Yeah, that's it.
But no, a lot of it is my mom is now, is here with me in Burlington, and with having my son and his father and I not being together anymore. For one, I can't really move. I'm kind of stuck here. But when I came here to Wisconsin in 2011, I felt like I was home. This is one of 2 homes for me.
Holy
the
crap.
other place that I have felt at home
ago?
is in Halifax, Nova Scotia.
It's been that long ago?
I moved from Vegas to Illinois in 2007. and then I moved in 11 up here to Wisconsin.
Wow. Okay. Cool.
So
So,
it's home.
how does Madame Cora's Emporium fit in with, or does it have anything to do with the museum, or is it?
It does.
Are
It
they
is like kind of the financial wing for the beginning of the museum. It
okay?
gives me a space to start displaying some of the items. But a lot of the times with museums, because they're a not-for-profit organization, they really rely on donations, whether it's the artifacts, or money in. Being able to purchase items for the museum to put in its collection, there's a whole lot of legal mumbo jumbo that has to happen with
Right.
it, and you could end up losing, like the key items that you really, really want. Whereas one of the things where Mom and I with with Madame Cora's, like say there's a lot of something where it's 8 different pieces, but we only really want this one key piece because that is museum quality, where the rest is like, collector's quality.
Sure.
We can actually buy the lot, put that one thing into the seed collection, our personal collection that's pretty much starting the museum, and then sell the rest through Madame Cora's. That gives people the ability, and ups the ability to go, we really want this top-notch item that the museum would not be able to get on its own. We can purchase it, put it into the collection.
There
But
you
then
go.
also if we have like an 1870s embalming table and we happen to find a better one than the one that's already in our collection within the museum, we can purchase it, swap it out, and increase the quality of the artifacts that are in the museum. But that gives people the ability that when they start going through the museum, if there's something there that they go, I really want to have that. I really want to have something like that. They'll be able to go to Madame Cora's and find items that are very similar to the ones that are in the museum.
Cool.
So right now it's been my creative outlet, everything from coffin-shaped pillows to scrunchies to jewelry to magnets, you name it, I've got everything. It's one of the reasons why I called it the Emporium, because it just covers everything.
Yeah.
So I'm the cutest little odd shop in Burlington. But as we start to progress with the museum, the knickknacks, the tchotchkes, the things like that will start going away, and it will start moving over into more of the oddities, curiosities, and antiques side of it. So Cora's does spell out curiosities, oddities, relics, antiques, and supplies.
So
So
where do you find these items? I mean,
everywhere.
yeah.
You can pick them up at yard sales to antique stores and malls to
Estate
flea
sales
markets.
and
If you know what you're looking for,
right. And that's the key right there. Know what you're looking for, because just because something is from the 1800s doesn't mean it's worth anything.
right.
Yeah. So
But it's a question of, people always say, well, what is it worth? What is it worth? Well, that's what it's worth is really subject to the amount of people collecting it. Just like Pyrex has been, blowing up everywhere, and everybody's like, oh, Pyrex, and so they've got this listed on eBay for $10,000. Well, go to the sold tab and see what it was last sold for.
right.
It's
And
not worth $10,000. It's worth what somebody's willing to pay. But you do also have pieces that are, if you go and have them appraised, that are going to be priceless and invaluable. My kitchen table, for example, I have a kitchen table that's early Americana styling, slight mission style. If the wood really is what it is, technically it's priceless.
wow.
Because it's supposedly American chestnut, which went extinct basically in the 1920s. There's only been like 5 American chestnut trees found in the wild since,
Whoa.
because because a blight came in and wiped it all out.
Yeah.
So they're in the process of rebreeding. They bred a Chinese chestnut with the American chestnut, but it will always be different than the
Sure.
original. So technically, it's priceless. For me, it's a dining room table.
Yeah. Well, it's only worth what somebody will pay for it. So, and that's the key. So, if I remember correctly, you have been involved in a lot of pirate fests, steampunk. Is that why that because of that interest that got you into that area?
No,
You just
just
like
a little
doing it?
bit. I've been doing the Renaissance fairs 30 years? No,
Wow.
28 years I've been doing Renaissance fairs. Back when the Las Vegas Renaissance Fair took up a small, tiny portion of the park, Sunset Park,
Right.
when it was just a handful of tents and a couple of people,
Yeah.
that's when I started doing Ren Fair. And I got into pirate stuff way before Pirates of the Caribbean ever came out. And people were like, what are you doing dressing like a pirate? And then Pirates of the Caribbean came out and it exploded. And I was just like, I was an original. And I got into steampunk. I loved the aesthetic. I've always, the piracy, grand age of piracy and the Victorian era have been my two favorite eras of history, as well as like Viking history. I'm a history nut.
Yeah. Well, and you would have to be, or if you're not, at least it would be, to make anything like that profitable, you would have to know something about history. And if you enjoy it on top of it, then it's not a job, it's fun,
It is, and that's been one of the best things about the museum. Because when I get into a subject, I literally go and buy every book possible, and I pour through them. At this point in time, in the last maybe 2.5 years that I've been planning the museum, I think I've literally gone through over 100 books.
Wow.
And most of them are committed to memory. People are so surprised at how much information I have crammed in my head. And it was to the point where, like, I wanted to get my hands on the funeral director's Bible. It's the blue book that they use in mortuary school. I wanted to get my hands on the textbooks. And this one lady from a school in Illinois offered me one of the books, and they're normally like 150, 200 bucks. And when I went to go talk to her, because she knew something was up. I was in a funeral directors group on Facebook, but she knew I wasn't in school yet.
Yeah.
And she kind of figured out, and I told her, I said, well, I'm actually in the process of starting a museum. So I'm trying to get as much information as possible. And it's the history of funeral directing that I could piece it together, but it's, already in a book.
Yeah.
And there was a new book that came out, hot off the press, doesn't even have a barcode.
Wow.
And she handed me that one too. And she goes, read both of these and let me know what you think, because we're thinking of swapping them out, changing out the one book for the other.
Right.
So I was one of the first people, I was the first person for that school to actually read that book. None of the other administrators had read it, and she gave me that privilege, and I'm not even part of the school.
Wow.
So I devoured both books literally in a week, and I'm talking, 400 some odd pages each. And then I called her up and I go, so do you want me to sugarcoat it or do you want the truth? She was like, the truth. I was like, well, both books are really good, but yeah, stick with the older one. The new one had some information that was wrong just because of all of the, research that I've done through all the different time periods of history, finding my niche. It had a lot of discrepancies and it didn't get into a lot of the areas it should have. But I was like, but the military side of this book, that's something that could be added.
Right.
So I felt honored and privileged that I got to have the book before it even really became available.
That's amazing. So
when you get on something you love, you learn all you can.
Of all the things that you've studied about this and this subject, is there one thing that stands out the most, like, whoa, I never would have thought something like that?
How the funeral industry, the medical industry, and the rise of spiritualism changed so much and challenged each other so much through the 100-year span from the 1850s to the 1950s. How all the connections worked against each other or for each other is what I found to be absolutely amazing. Most people, they're like, oh, well, the medical, that's what changed. They don't realize the other outside influences, like the start of the funeral industry and the rise of spiritualism, how those challenged the medical side. If they hadn't, we would still probably not have patented medicines. Our life expectancy would be so low,
right.
It would be ridiculous. Our quality of life would be so low. And for me, it was starting to connect the dots on how the different industries challenged each other and how that skyrocketed us and how much we progressed in just 100-year span.
And you talk about on the website about the our unwillingness or aversion to talking about death, and how, 100 years ago, 150 years ago, it was something that was discussed more openly because it was more of a, I mean, it
It was
was
a
more,
daily occurrence.
yeah, and
Back through the, back before the turn of the century, and before, a lot of progress was made, death was every day, sex was the taboo. We didn't talk about sex at all. I mean, if a woman showed her ankle, it was scandalous.
yeah. But
Meanwhile, the bells would start tolling,
that's the
and you would
Victorian
start,
influence there, right?
huh?
That's the Victorian influence at that time, because prior to that time it was not that strict, or it was really,
If you've noticed, if you look at the timeline and the history of garments, clothing,
right?
the 1100s, because that's where my mom started, was the 1100s. Men and women's clothing was pretty much the same. It was like especially in Europe, it was basically a big, huge long dress called a hoopla, and both men and women wore the same. So like basically envision like the wizard's robes.
Right.
Then as time progressed, men's hemlines creeped up, but women's became bulkier.
Wow.
So women's hemlines have pretty much always been to the floor and have always concealed the female body. It may accentuate curves, but it's always concealed, whereas men, like by the 1400s, 1500s, the hemline was so far up the human body that the Catholic Church declared that you needed to wear a triangular piece of cloth to cover the unsightly bulges of the male anatomy, and hence the codpiece was born.
Ah, because I had heard a
But
lot about the codpiece and why and where that came from, so now I know.
and it started off just as a flat piece of of fabric to help hide the bulge,
Right.
but then men, being peacocks, started adding to it, started showing off, and Henry VIII even had a massive codpiece made that had vases in it, and he would walk down the street handing out rosebuds from his codpiece to the women on the street. Men would put, we're like, why do we need the bag on our hip that's got all of our, gems and coins and things like that in it, when we've got this up front?
Right.
So they turned that into the pouch, and cod is slang for bag. So that's why it's called a codpiece. But men have always been allowed to be a little bit more free about, sexuality.
Sure.
But women were not. So keeping our ankles covered, having hemlines down to the floor, was very prevalent all the way up until the 1920s.
Really?
So we didn't talk about sex. Things were very scandalous, but death was every day. And people died at home. You took care of them at home. It really wasn't until the Great Depression that people, that funeral homes started taking care of the dead. As the Great Migration from, urban areas into inner cities, higher density populations,
Right.
when you didn't have the parlor in order to do your wake and things like that, that's where funeral homes started. So now the door started to be closed, where we weren't handling our dead. We weren't washing them and taking care of them and prepping them. They were whisked away. And then with hospitals and their transitions, now people were starting to die more in hospitals rather than at home. Once they were gone, they were whisked away, and the magic happened behind closed doors. And that's about where we started separating ourselves from death. And then things started to swap. Now you had you had the Radium Girls of the 1920s. You had the jazz era. You had hemlines were short, chests were flat. It was all about rolling down them stockings and rouging them knees, where sex started to become the main subject, and death started to become taboo. And nowadays, people don't want to talk about it. They don't want to talk about the fact that the day you turn 18, you're an adult.
Yeah.
You go out partying with your friends at the age of 18. On your 18th birthday, you get into a car accident. You're kept on life support until your parents sue you to take you off if you do not have things in place.
Right.
But we don't want to talk about that. We think we're invincible because death is no longer happening in front of us.
Well, and
So
we're not as exposed to it, except on film. But and I think that kind of makes us almost immune to the feelings because of that, because it's not real. You'll see the actor get killed in one movie and he's back in a different movie or a different TV show or whatever. So we're kind of grown up with that. That's really stupid.
So that's one of the reasons for the museum, is not only connect the dots throughout history to show us how far we've come, how far we can go, but start removing some of that you factor from death and dying and put it back in front of everybody to get them talking about it again. Because if you don't know what what their wishes are, and all of a sudden you have to take care of it, you're going to be kicking yourself going, did I do the right thing? Is it what they wanted? Start talking about it now.
Yes.
So if we can peel back those layers of the mystery and get people talking about it, it saves the rest of us from a lot of headaches and mental hurt.
There was a case, I know at least 10 years ago, and I can't remember the young woman's name, Shively or no, where she was on life support, and there was a huge, media frenzy about, keeping her on the life support, and her boyfriend had said, no, this isn't what she wanted, and they were kept going back and forth. And at that particular time, I was going around telling everybody, hey, if that's me, pull the plug. I don't want that. And, I told my family, I told everyone. And so that particular situation, I think, helped a lot of people because they did start talking about what if. If you don't have an advance directive or something like that tells your loved ones or the people around you what you need, an NDR do not resuscitate or something like that. I think that's important that we have that. So I want to ask you about because you're talking about the funeral homes. There are different cultures have different ways of dealing with the bodies of the deceased. Whether
Correct.
you have cremation, whether you have burial, whether you have burial at sea, or the Vikings set you on fire, and So where did you? What do you know about that, or have you done any investigating on the beginnings of those types of things?
Well, that's actually one of the rooms that we want to do within the
cool.
museum when we start talking about the funeral, in the funeral industry area. That's one of the things is I want to start breaking it down by culture. So that way people can learn about other cultures, but also there's a lot of differences like between North and South. There's a lot of differences between Ohio and Illinois, even though they're right next to each other.
Yeah.
There's so many differences, that we can start talking about and bringing enlightenment to, just like Jewish burials. I didn't know anything about Jewish funeral customs until I ended up being a pallbearer for my Jewish aunt.
Wow.
We kind of adopted her into the family, and she passed away. And I found out with Jewish people, you're supposed to be in the ground within 24 hours.
Right.
The problem is she died like right after Christmas in Wisconsin. Ground was frozen. They had to defrost the ground. So we ended up burying her finally December 31st.
Wow. Well,
and so most of their friends, men, are the ones who are supposed to carry the coffin. It's a plain pine box, no embalming, just kept it, cold
Right.
temperatures until they could get her in the ground. But then there's an entire ritual to it. I mean, there's ritual from the moment of death, stopping the clock, turning the mirrors in, tearing your clothes. There's a whole set of things that go on up to the burial. But it was so fascinating for me is that on the way out of the synagogue, we stopped like 7 times. We got her in to the hearse, transported over. Then when we got her out, it was 7 stops, 7 prayers from the hearse to the gravesite. Then everyone that was there was to take the shovel upside down, put a small scoop in to show her that we were understanding she needed to go, but we're not in a hurry to let her leave.
Gotcha.
And I didn't know that. I didn't know that about Jewish customs and how this entire thing. So I started researching because we do want to break it down. So I want to talk to people with, because I mean, you've got Dias de Muertos with Day of the Dead. So we want to talk about their, the traditions. Why do they do the things that they do? The differences between Catholic and Christian and Jewish and you name it. I'd love to start talking to Native American tribes on how they do it, because there's not just one set of customs. There was
Right.
like the one that everybody recognizes, but where do all those customs come from?
Well, and some of that has to do with geography as well. For example, New Orleans, because of the groundwater there, you can't really bury anybody. So that's why
Right.
you see all of the cemeteries with, above ground.
Above ground crypts.
Right. So, and I don't think that we always think about that, well, why do they do that? Well, because if you put them in the ground, they're going to come floating up in a couple of days. So,
And I mean, they still have that problem with coffins, even with being above ground. Anytime that there is a hurricane and
Sure.
a flood, coffins could start floating down the road.
yeah.
And there's a lot of like weird, things that we don't talk about, like coffin syrup, exploding coffin syndrome. It was said that a prophecy was told to King Henry VIII that the dogs would eat his remains. And it actually came true.
Wow.
After he was dead, they put him in a casket, and then they buried him, and they had guards on, guarding the door. Well, with decay and the amount of adipose tissue that he had, it kind of liquefied into what we call coffin syrup, built up pressure, and it started leaking out. And the dogs got in and were licking up the coffin syrup.
Wow.
So yeah, the dogs were eating his remains. So there's gross, disgusting sides to everything. But then you find out about like exploding coffin syndrome. And it's like, well, what had happened to that? Well, pressure builds up like a pressure cooker and it explodes.
Wow.
So depending upon where you're at, there's different types of burials because of because of the climate.
Well, and there's a story about Mozart that, when they buried him, had to be a secret where he was buried because he owed money, and they were afraid that people would come and dig him up and hold his body for ransom. So,
Correct.
yeah, we're weird. We do some weird stuff, So
Well,
that's gotta be fascinating.
you had the resurrectionists, that were feeding the medical schools for centuries. So grave robbing. So you find all these graves that have like cages and stuff over them.
Yeah.
There was a whole thing about body snatching where you had actually explosives rigged in for whom the bell tolls. All sorts of different, the graveyard shift. There's a whole lot of.
I thought that was cool that they have the little bells there inside the coffin because people were getting buried alive.
Or having it attached to their toe or finger, so as the string went through the tube, if you
Right.
pulled on it, it would ring the bell.
Right, and then the people that would hang out there to listen for the bell. That's how the graveyard shift came about. So weird.
So we'll be dispelling some of the myths and really getting into some more of
Oh,
it.
okay. So that was a myth. That was a BS story.
As to be determined.
Okay. So you got to come to the museum and take the tour to find out, right?
Pretty much.
There you go. Okay. Well, I hope you're going to let me know when you get open because I think that's something that would be worth a trip. That
It will be. And with Milwaukee, there's so many amazing places to go see, like the art museum. The art museum in Milwaukee actually opens up a shade and then closes several times a day with the sun. And to me, it looks like a boat,
Oh, cool.
but it's supposed to be like a flying bird. So, we've got the Milwaukee Public Museum. Now, supposedly the Milwaukee Public Museum, which currently is 220,000 square feet, the building has become so outdated and needs more work than what they can handle. They've been talking about moving the Milwaukee Public Museum to a new building and downsizing. So, but right now the Milwaukee Public Museum is absolutely fantastic. There's so many fun exhibits that they do there too. So I'll just be one of the museums. You'll have to come
There
do
you
a
go.
museum tour.
And don't they make beer there too?
Oh yeah.
Sorry.
Oh yeah. And squeaky cheese. You have to have the cheese curds.
The what?
Squeaky cheese. Cheese curds.
Oh, cheese curds. Yes. Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
If you
No,
go right to the dairy and you get them fresh from the dairy, when you chew on them, they actually squeak.
I don't want to eat food that squeaks.
Oh, it's fun.
Yeah.
So
For
yeah, no, we
somebody
do a
who goes
lot of,
around
there's
talking
a lot
about
of
dead
beer
things
here.
all the time, yeah, I could think that. No, sorry. I'm just fascinated by all of this because it is, in my experience, it's something that is really unique. This is not something I would think of. Let's go to the the Museum of Mortality. It's I mean that's got to be something that once the word gets out, I think it's going to explode. I think this is going to be something that just takes off like nobody's business.
There's nothing like it in the world.
Yeah.
And that's been part of my research is I was supposed to pull financial reports and things from museums that are my competition. There's nothing like it. You've got different aspects that are featured at different museums.
Sure.
Like you've got the Funeral Museum in Texas. They handle the funeral industry.
Right.
And they've got an amazing collection of hearses. One of the next closest ones is going to be like the Mutter Museum in Pennsylvania. You've also got the the International Museum of Surgical Sciences in Chicago. That's the closest I can get.
Wow.
And those only cover 2 of the 3 industries. And the rest, there's other smaller ones that are for-profit museums that might cover like spiritualistic, movement and things like that, but nothing like everything all in one. And people go, well, you've got the Museum of Death in Louisiana and LA. And I'm like, it's nowhere near the same thing. First of all, the Museum of Death in LA and in LA are for-profit, they're business. The one in LA in California focuses primarily more on celebrity death. So how celebrities have died.
Right.
The one down south in Louisiana has focused more on serial killers and serial killer memorabilia. They're not how death has been.
Right.
So we're taking
it's just
from
one
an educational
aspect.
standpoint. Huh?
I said it's just one aspect, one very narrow aspect. So
Correct.
that was my probation
Nope.
officer. No.
So we're combining everything, all the different things into one complete package.
So
So
are you in a position that you can accept donations? Is that, I mean, that won't screw up your nonprofit status or your filing or anything like that? I mean, or have you even reached that point yet?
we haven't quite reached that point yet. Right now I am still working on collecting money for the 501c3,
Okay.
not-for-profit paperwork. As soon as that is filed, then, like larger donations, if you want to be able to write off a donation, then once I have the 501c3, then you will have the tax benefits that you would writing off to any normal organization or charity.
But I mean, if somebody said, well, that's really cool, I want to help you do this, I got $50, where can I send it? Do you have?
We've got a campaign on GoFundMe. You can also send it directly to the PayPal.
Okay. If you can send me the link to the GoFundMe, I'll add it onto the show so that people can get that. I think that's cool. This is, I'm just blown away. It's so much more than I expected when we first started talking about doing this. It's fascinating. I just think that I'm just excited for you. I mean, I can just see you're passionate about this. It's something that you love doing, which makes life so much better to live if you're able to do something that you're passionate about. And
that's the dash in the middle.
Pardon me? The dash in the middle. That's absolutely it.
And it comes from a poem and a book called The Dash. I can't remember the author right off the top of my head, but she had the whole poem about how living your life, it's not the beginning dates, the end dates, it's the dash in the middle.
Right.
And if you're sitting there in the mundane world and you're not passionate about anything, you might as well already be at your end date.
Well, this is my passion, what I'm doing right here. I mean, I've been in construction my entire life, and I've only been doing this the last 6 or 7 years, and it's something that I literally am very passionate about. I love doing it. I love the opportunity to talk with people like you You know, we got a great studio here, and people come in and talk about all kinds of crap, and they got their own shows. But it's just, I learn so much from so many different people, and I can, you know, this whole thing. I mean, I'm making notes here because there's things I want to go look up now. You know, I want to be better informed. And do you have any clue at all when you might be able to get this thing opened and off the ground?
The sooner I can get my 501c3, the better.
Okay.
So we're looking at between 3 and 5 years. It depends upon if I have to build from the ground up.
Right.
Now we're working on, you know, once I have the 501c3, we're going to start going after the major fundraising and the major donations. Like, you know, most people, they'll do like black tie galas and things like that. One of the things that we're doing differently is, yes, we'll have that for the higher end donations.
Right.
But I'm doing the museum, Madison Odd Market. So it's just a basic kind of a craft show with the weird and odd theme to it. So it's a little bit of everything there, but we'll do that so that the average person who may only have the small ticket fee can get in. They're still helping build the museum.
Cool.
So if you even now, if you were to donate $250 towards like the GoFundMe for my 501c3, I'm keeping that information, and you will have a brick in the museum.
That
is a
great idea. I love that.
One of the parts of the museum is we actually want to do a streets of old time. So as you start on the beginning of the street, it'll be like compacted dirt that'll be epoxied down. So you're starting off on a dirt street and moving into cobblestone and moving into, you know, more concrete. So as you walk the timeline of all these different buildings, you're walking through a timeline. And each building will have a different aspect to, you know, part of the museum. But each one will be like a mini museum within the museum.
That's brilliant.
So we'll have places where we're going to have the brick walls where you'll be able to put, you know, your name or, you know, what you would like on the brick within reason, and you will be part of it. So like if you did $250 even before the 501c3, I'm going to make sure that you get a brick in the wall. But I do want to
I could be just another brick in the wall?
One of the fun things that I want to do, though, is I want to actually have a cemetery. I want to try and pit companies against each other with tombstones. Here lies Pepsi from this state to this state. We'll miss you, Coca-Cola. Here lies Coca-Cola. So, you know, those are going to be major tombstones, but they're going to, you know, I want it to be about the fun of it. So if you have a mortal enemy that you really want to just do that for, talk to me, because I know the donation levels necessary for that.
Awesome. So you're going to send me the link, right, for the GoFundMe? Okay.
Yes.
I'm just blown away, kiddo. I mean, I just really, you know, starting out from this, which is, for those of you who don't know, I bought this from Melinda. How long ago has that been now? 6, 7 years, 8 years maybe? The filigree toad?
2014.
Okay, so yeah, 5, 6 years ago, 7 years ago. So I had bought some, I was looking for some stuff for, you know, kind of like steampunkish stuff for a photo shoot that I was doing, and I found Melinda's site online and bought the stuff. I have to tell you, for as little as I paid for this, I was amazed at the quality of the product that I got. I was just, I mean, because I still have this, it's still in perfect shape. I mean, I take care of it, but I don't just throw it in a drawer or something. But it's beautiful work. I mean, you made these all yourself? Is that, no? Okay.
No, I helped put them together, but
yeah, okay. So
it was curating the pieces.
Gotcha. Well, you did an awesome job, and if you do half as good with the museum as you did with this, it's going to be a knockout. So anything else that you'd like to share before we wrap this up?
Not that I can think of. I've got TikTok for the museum. The museum has its own.com. As soon as I have the 501c3, I'm switching it over to a .org.
Okay.
We also have Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, and YouTube. So I am working on doing short videos and long videos. But I have so much information crammed in my head with all the different books that I don't know where to start. So in order to start getting more information out there, I'm asking people, if you have questions, shoot it to me. Whether it's through Facebook, Instagram, or even TikTok or YouTube, shoot me a message and ask me questions, because your questions will get answered somewhere in a video. So I had a friend of mine go, well, what's the difference between embalming and mummification? So I did a 3-minute YouTube video on the difference between embalming and mummification.
That's
so I'm going to
brilliant.
start working on taking some of the individual artifacts and talking about their stories. There's a lot of fun things that are going to go on with the grand opening of the story. In fact, I'm actually, or with the museum, I'm actually in the process of creating and designing an entire game that will launch the same time as the museum, based on artifacts within the museum.
Wow, that's awesome. All right, so I have
follow us, shoot me messages, ask me questions, and it could get turned into a video.
I have a proposal for you. If you may or may not know, of course, I have the website, I have our YouTube channel. I also have a Roku channel. And if you would like, if you have these little short videos, let's put those together, and I will put them on our YouTube channel, and I will put them on our Roku channel. And we will have a section for the museum and for Madame Cora's. And so we can help you get the word out, because our YouTube is worldwide, so is Roku and all of that stuff. So if it's something that you'd like to do, get a hold of me after we do this later today, or when you got a minute, and let's put something like that together, because I think I think it's something that people are going to love and help. They can follow your progress as you get closer to putting this together. So anyway, and if you'd rather not, that's okay too. So.
But once I get the 501c3 and once we start going after donorship and whatnot, there's also going to be programs where people, kind of like a Kickstarter type of thing,
right,
where people can basically help invest in getting the museum up and going. And there will be perks, especially if you're interested in games. The game is going to be absolutely amazing, and it'll be for anyone and everyone. But I'll give you a hint. It is card and dice based.
Ooh.
But the cards will be collectible, and most of them will be based on artifacts in the museum. So I'm actually working on having the website coding done, and I'm going to have a program designed from scratch for artifacts and cataloging the artifacts, because we're going to need backdoor access. So if you come across a card in your deck and you go, what is this? You'll be able to pull it up through the special access from the website into the archives, read about the item's history, and then where it's located in the museum, so you can go see it in person.
Cool. That's
so
awesome.
It's just one small aspect. So
I'm a
gotta follow along.
I'm a big Sherlock Holmes fan, so I would suggest that you call the game Foot, so that you can say the game is afoot. Sorry. We should end on that, because that's it's not going to get any worse. It's not going to get any worse than that. Seriously though, Melinda, I'm so happy that you took the time to come and talk to us about this. I'm just blown away. I am absolutely, literally blown away. I want to be telling everyone I know. I want to share this. I want to get the word out and help you get this thing built as quickly as possible, because I'm getting old and I want to make sure I can still make it there before it's my time, So
let's do that, okay?
Okay, that sounds like a plan. So
next time I'm back in Vegas, we're going for drinks.
Oh, hey, listen, anytime. You're welcome here anytime. If you're going to be in Vegas, let me know. You're not coming out for the
hopefully October. I should hopefully be out in October.
Yeah, once the weather gets a little bit nicer, it gets down below 90.
My 20th high school reunion, take 2. It was
Oh.
supposed to be last year. I graduated from Bonanza High School, class of 2000, out there in Las Vegas.
Wow.
So last year was supposed to be our 20th high school reunion,
Right.
but it got postponed. So I'm hoping to make it out for my reunion in
That
October.
would be cool. Please let me know. We'll have you in the studio. We'll do a whole thing, and
And people can ask questions, and we can do them on here.
you bet. All right.
Looking forward to it. See you guys
any
online,
final
and
words?
if you have questions, ask.
All right, kiddo. Thank you very much. Stay with me for just a moment. And for all you folks watching, thank you for your support here at the studio and at the station WWDB-TV. We do this for you, and we appreciate your support, and we appreciate you watching us, and we appreciate your support of our guests. So this is something that I think is just going to explode. So please check out the museumofmortality.com. Is that not correct?
.org will redirect you.
Right. Okay. So anyway, just remember, if you're going to do it with styles. See ya.
Nice work, John.